Do you ever wonder how many times you gave up right before you were about to succeed? It's an impossible question because you can't possibly know the answer. There was an anecdote that was said to me once that was many of life's greatest accomplishments were achieved by people too ignorant of the odds to know that they were quote unquote impossible. I just love the concept. And when you sit with it, it's a riveting thought. Like, how many times did you stop just short of what maybe wouldn't have brought you to the peak of the mountain, but would have created that momentum or, been a slingshot for that trajectory? There's kind of a funny story with one of my good friends. He's quite a bit older than me, but back in the day in Florida, we were business partners on a few things, still great friends with him. And, there was some overlap in our circle, obviously. And, down the street, there was a yoga / interval training studio. And we went to that a few times. And he met this girl there who, her and a few other people sort of became our circle. Like, we'd have coffee every once in a while together, all of us. And, he was all about this girl. And I checked with him, by the way. It's okay that I'm telling this story. But, he would ask her out or allude to grabbing a drink or dinner. And it was like, she just kind of wasn't hearing it, wasn't feeling it, which is just, that's life in the big city, right? Sometimes you shoot your shot and it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And, he was persistent, not in a bad way. I know you can easily conflate this to be something bad. It was in a charming way, right? And I remember being in the car with him and he was talking about her, asking her to go on a trip or something like that he was going on. And I said, hey, dude, at what point are you going to throw the towel on this? Like, at what point has your ego taken enough of a beating? At what point is your pride, taken so much that you just walk away? And it's one of these moments I'll never forget. Eddie, she only needs to say yes once. I laughed and I said, okay, dude. And a few years later, they're engaged and probably the happiest couple, I've ever seen. They're always together. They're just always laughing. They have this beautiful thing. And, it's the same question. Like, how many times do we stop just short? Right? Like, maybe the time he asked when her plans fell through and it was her favorite restaurant or whatever it was, right? And again, I want to be very careful with this because, it can be conflated or blown out of proportion. He's a very respectful human being. But it's just, it is for me, a perfect metaphor of just stopping way before you've gotten what you've wanted in other areas of life. It's like, I remember John Paul DeJoria talking about, hopefully I didn't butcher his name, but way back, it was one of the first speeches I ever wrote. When a door closes in your face, it could be the very next door. And so you have to depersonalize failure and keep knocking. And I think I'll speak for myself. One of the things that you're sort of sheltered from in a lot of, or I was in my old world where, things were very structured and predictable. When you're sort of out on your own in the wilderness, building something, starting your own business, knocking on doors, reaching out, creating things, seeing what works, you learn that failure is part of the process, that rejection is just, it is an important character in the story. And if you let it define you, it will. Right? The thing about progress in a particular endeavor is that life doesn't stop. You choose. Right? So I can tell you some projects I've worked on that, man, I thought they would be game-changing. I thought they would be life-altering. I thought they would bring value to millions of people. And look, sometimes they just swing and miss. And it's very easy to look around and go, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not what I thought I was. Right? The mind will write stories for you if you let it. But it's like, no, this is just a door that was shut in your face. Go knock on the next one. And the funny thing is, the thing that takes off, or the thing that is perceived well, that does add value, oftentimes isn't even much different from the thing that was rejected. It's a slight pivot. It's a slight alteration, right? And so I say all of this to put in your brain that so many of the things we want in life, we stop short. And I like to think of almost. I like to think of, the best-selling book that was almost written, right? Imagine J.K. Rowling picks up the pen and goes, maybe later. Or Michael Jordan, famously, cut from his varsity basketball team. People don't talk about the fact that he was a killer on the JV squad for a while, but still, he looks around and he goes, now maybe basketball's not my jam. There is that version of success for you in something that you will either say yes or say no to. You can't let outside circumstances dictate that in your world. You don't want to be a victim of almost, because some of the most important, most powerful things you will ever do live on the other side of almost. They live behind mountains of almost. If you're looking around and you're going, hey, this isn't for me, this isn't what I thought, I've tried, I've dabbled, I'm not really feeling it, that's different. But the world does not get to dictate your story, you do. And this is obviously not in the same narrative as dating. This is like life, right? It's like the world cannot tell you when to stop or what's enough. You decide that. You take in the information, in the pieces, you take all these variables and you decide, right? Don't forget how much power you have there. Don't forget how fragile our egos are and how we're always tempted to stop when things become difficult. You only need one yes in many situations. The question is not whether that yes is out there. The question is, are you willing to keep stepping towards it until it arrives?